It's Clark and Perry on the case. Da-na-na-na. Clark and Perry
Do what it takes.
Da-na-na-na. Clark and Perry investigate.
The activities and interests of local artists in the Windy City's finest throughout both Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, Alberta. Available on TELUS, Optic TV, On Demand, VidFlex, YouTube, and more for limited time only. Terms and conditions apply.
Da-na-na-na.
Hello, and welcome once again to the Windy City's finest. I'm Clark, he's Perry, and we are joined today by the Darin Clisby. How's it going, Darin?
Good. How's it going with everyone else?
It seems to be actually probably most ideal conditions ever. There's a little bit of wind since we're taking things outside for the first time in a while. We have you kind of presenting yourself as a digital photographer.
Right.
How long have you been doing that?
Digital wise, oh man, maybe 2007, somewhere around there.
Oh my goodness.
So it's been a while. And before then I was doing film, like all the way back to my college years. So.
Oh goodness. So like where exactly, so I guess where could you say that your artistic story began?
My artistic story in general, outside of photography, started in college.
Okay.
Because I took a visual communications course at Medicine Hat College.
Yeah.
And it's multidisciplinary, so I learned like sculpture, painting, drawing, photography, a little bit of video. So it's like a broad spectrum of sort of creative applications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they kind of show you a whole broad spectrum, like you were just saying right there, on just anything that you can do within the degree. What took you like straight to filming?
I guess maybe the linchpin on it was digital. That helped a lot because before then with film it was an expensive sort of thing to get into. You had to buy rolls, and every shot you took cost you something.
Yeah.
And around that time I was taking a trip to India.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a digital camera and took it along just because I could take a lot of photos and not worry about expenses.
Yeah, no, I mean the evolution of technology has really kind of shown off. Like we were just talking just earlier, we're filming this all on an iPhone 14.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, everything that these folks have seen, everything that we've done has just been on that phone alone. It's crazy to think that cameras can go in such a long way. So that's actually kind of something that we could talk about as well too. What's the difference between some cameras that you have and which ones do you typically look for with what you do?
I go for a full DLSR. So it's like kind of the form factor looks like film. Maybe it's because I'm used to it. So it's got a certain amount of bulk and heaviness, and they're high performance. Usually the resolution of the imagery is like really high. The one I currently have is over 45 megapixels, so it's, I don't know, for that camera that I have, it's sort of top end for its time.
Right.
So, yeah.
And if I can kind of slow you down right there as well too,
okay.
I know we've had the chance to kind of interview somebody else with photography, but this stuff goes over my head.
Oh, okay.
And like you threw out a few different like DPX or what's the resolution size on some of these cameras here?
When you're talking about megapixels, it's
megapixels. That's right.
Yeah. That's just defining how many millions of pixels, not pickles. How many millions of pixels compose the image. So if you have a 46 megapixel, that means there's 46 million pixels, like dots that make the image up.
Right.
So
now when I try to zoom in and try to get a screenshot of some of my best moments in these pictures as well too, I notice that they sometimes start to pixelate a little bit more.
Yeah.
So does that obviously has a direct effect with the megapixels. So I mean, does it just increase kind of the highlights of the face if you're just taking the pictures as they are when it comes to those resolutions?
The megapixel, I think a lot of people think of it as a camera rating almost. And the higher you have, it's like better. But it really comes down to optics, what kind of lenses you're using, and that's where you can make an image sing. So I used to teach at the college, like a community course in digital photography. And I said you could buy whatever body you want, but if you're going to invest, make sure you invest in good glass, as we call it, so that, because that's what translates what you're seeing into the image.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of it's almost like your eye. Like you want your eye to be like in good condition.
And so you taught a course on this, right?
Yeah.
How long did you do that?
Oh man. So this is pre-COVID.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it sort of collapsed it.
The dark ages.
Yeah, the dark ages. Yeah. I think it was about 6 or 7 years. So it was maybe I'd conduct one course
Mm-hmm.
twice a year or something like that.
And so you said that it's all about necessarily the lenses that you have.
Mhm.
So when it comes to the camera versus the lens, what would you spend more, like, I guess, I don't want to put a monetary value on things, but
yeah.
what would you spend more money on?
Probably lenses.
Lenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
The body, it can carry with you like for a long time,
Mhm.
and but what you're attaching to it, that's where you're going to get the quality and sharpness and
Yeah.
everything you're looking for in the image.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of does the stuff that the filters can't do, or the
Right,
filters,
yeah.
or the filters
Try
like
to cover up.
add, yeah, and cover up.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that makes sense. So, well, you obviously have shown off that you've gotten a plethora of experience doing this as well too. What would you say is your greatest accomplishment with this?
With photography,
Yeah.
okay. Probably last summer,
Mm-hmm.
there was someone I follow on Twitter, and she just put out an invitation, and they said, hey, I know that I'm connected to a bunch of creative people.
Right.
Why don't you share some of your creativity?
Yeah.
So I decided, yeah, I'll just throw it out there.
Mhm.
So next thing I know, she direct messages me and says, hey, do you do commissions? And I'm like, yeah, I could do commissions.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done any, but at the time she asked if I would, and I'm like, yeah, I will. And then she asked me some other questions, like what my day rate is and things like that. And I've had similar things like this happen before,
Mm-hmm.
but it's usually just sort of, it never really amounted to anything.
Yeah.
But the conversation kept going, and then we had like some Zoom meetings, and they wanted me to go to Washington, D.C. and photograph a series of photos based on the 7 deadly sins for...
Oh my goodness, that is
Yeah.
so cool.
It was pretty exciting. And yeah, so they wanted to fit, it was a legal organization
Yeah.
called Pacific Legal,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to connect a deadly sin to a court case that they were handling in their quarterly magazine. So they flew me out there, put me up, paid for all my expenses. They hired like cast and crew and makeup and hair and everything. And I was the guy in there just setting up lights, and so I was the photographic element.
That's amazing.
It was
the one with the big hat and everything. You were
Yeah.
able to make those
Yeah, yeah.
decisions as well too, right? No, more makeup. Back to makeup. I can imagine that being. That is so cool. How do you think that you may or may not have been discovered with that?
I think the particular photo I put up, it had to do with like black light. So it was like
Mhm.
it was like a body painting thing on
Mhm.
with black light, and they thought it was interesting, and they wanted to sort of incorporate some black light into this 7 deadly sins idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so we incorporated some of that, and their creative director kind of conceptualized everything for me, and I was there to kind of help shepherd it to
Provide the images
Yeah.
based off of the idea, right?
yeah.
No, that is amazing. So, have you had a lot of experience with black lights?
Over COVID,
Yeah.
ironically, I've had a lot of black light imagery
Mm-hmm.
done. Yeah, long process because you're applying it over someone, and I go a lot of detail with it,
Mm-hmm.
so it can take 6 hours of
Wow.
application, and then maybe an hour and a half of photography, and
Oh my goodness.
so it's pretty elaborate. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that the setup process is is actually, it's more time to take to prep this.
Yeah.
We would know.
Yeah.
But yeah, then to actually shoot it in the first place, that's really interesting. So like you mentioned that you use black light. We've had the chance to kind of see a few of your photos
Mhm.
as well too. What else do you kind of experiment with when it comes to the digital photography?
Oh, okay. Because I do a lot of compositing and kind of concept-driven things.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some remote lights that I sometimes use, and I can gel them different colors, so I can throw light, basically any color in the whole spectrum
Yeah.
that you can think of. Trying to think of some other location. Doesn't necessarily matter as much. A lot of my stuff I've done in like small rooms.
Yeah.
And it's because I photographed them with lighting and then clip them out and then resituate them into new environments.
Right. Which can actually kind of broaden a lot of what you can do as well, in fact. If you just crop somebody out and then put them in a different environment entirely, well, that saves you from, going out into the desert and having to beat the heat, basically, the entire time. No, that's...
Or to find an ideal location that matches what you're wanting to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to that as well too. So this is taking you to Washington, D.C. What was probably one of the more challenging places you've had to shoot?
Challenging places?
Yeah.
Well, there was a place in Lethbridge, actually.
Oh.
We were going to go down and we wanted to find a place where we could photograph in a river, or the river that runs through Lethbridge there.
Yep.
So the people I was working with, they suggested one park. And I'm like, oh, on the map, I found this other park. Maybe we should go there instead. And they're like, well, okay, it's going to be a bit of a longer walk. And I was like, oh, that's okay. It's like, I've got everything in my backpack. We'll just walk down there. But on the map, it doesn't look like a long distance to the river. But when you get there, you climb up. We went down a bunch of series of stairs. Went down this long path. Finally got to the river and it was under blazing heat, as Lethbridge and Medicine Hat both enjoy.
Yes, we are familiar.
Then we got down there and then realized we had no water with us. Ooh. So the challenge was getting there with all the heat, still going through with the photos, and then coming back and realizing...
surviving the trek back.
Oh yeah, I was definitely heat stroked. Like,
oh my goodness.
It was really bad.
Oh no.
So that was challenging. Maybe not technically challenging, but foolishness challenging. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, hey, you got to be prepared for every scenario that you can be, and you can't catch it all, right?
No.
So like, that's totally understandable too. No, that's funny.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, when it comes to, so you've been able to actually reach one of your greatest accomplishments so far. Well, now, of course, in the spirit of big momentum as well too, what are you still hoping to accomplish?
Photographically?
Yes.
In particular?
Let's get into that.
Okay. I like to do more of those commissioned work. So if anyone's needing anything, there's my shameful plug. But otherwise, I'm kind of getting more and more interested in doing videography and like kind of short film story kind of things. So that interests me. My son's been sort of doing it, and it sort of piqued my interest.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And what kind of draws you towards that?
Probably the storytelling.
Yes.
And or utilizes some of my understanding of photography, so it's an easy transition to kind of go over there. The hard part is understanding camera movement, and you're composing things a little differently for video than you would for stills, because you have to kind of anticipate motion. That's a big deal.
Yeah. So, well, it's everything that you are portraying, and honestly, like Perry and I, we got involved into theater, and film is very different, like completely, when it comes to setup, when it comes to prep, and just even when it comes to the acting, because we're used to being very big and very wide so that everybody in the audience can see us. But in film, it's so very subtle and just kind of very slight movements. Even with the eyes, it speaks so much as well too. So So when you say kind of short videos, are you looking towards like the YouTube Shorts and TikTok market, or is this more like 1 minute, 3 minute videos that kind of...
Maybe a little longer.
There you go. Okay.
Like maybe like short film, like 20 minutes.
Oh,
like short little stories. And, my daughter and son and I, we've kind of daydreamed about things we could do. Then it's just, we should actually just go do it. But I'm almost like, hey, I have to keep teaching myself. And once I understand something at a certain point, then we can do it. Yeah. But I think maybe we should just engage and learn as you go.
I can speak from experience. It just takes one big leap. You just got to do it. When it comes to this project in particular as well too, I will say, just take one big leap, and it's so worth it. It's trial by fire. There's challenges, but there's also a lot of victories and a lot of satisfaction that comes from it too. So I can talk about that all day as well too. So well, kind of stepping away a little bit out of the photography scene, let's kind of learn a little bit more about yourself. So, from a broad perspective, what would you say that you need more of in your life?
Time.
Oh man, you were like
Oh, really?
Everybody needs more time. But
that-
why do you need more time?
I think I've got a lot of things in my head where, like this, doing the short film, learning how to do it, juggling your work, kids, social life. There's just a lot of things happening, and if you just had like extra couple of hours, you could devote it to something that might propel you down a different path. That would be interesting. So, yeah, so time.
Yeah, artists are like their own worst critic for the most part, and they always wish they could spend more on a project or just require more time to do research for more projects as well too. So, yeah, you're definitely not alone with that.
Okay.
Well, in contrast to that question, what would you say that you need less of in your life?
Useless distractions.
Ah, okay.
Yes. So it's okay to have some distractions because it's entertaining, but I think it's a slippery kind of situation where you could sort of find yourself just getting down a YouTube rabbit hole where you're just like you're following one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and also you realize, oh, that time I so desperately wanted, I'm my own worst enemy and squandering it.
Yeah.
So
I can definitely say like that YouTube Shorts, I've just been I could spend hours in because it's just so quick entertainment that you can just flip. So yeah.
So it's,
No, I agree. So how do you get yourself away from those distractions?
Sheer force of will.
Yeah. I find I have to be in the right like set of like I got to be in the right mindset to like unplug and get away from it. And it kind of comes in waves. There are some times where I need to be content and just doing this for 20 minutes, and then at that 21st minute, I'm like, oh, yep, I feel it. I'm not inspired with this video anymore. I can unplug, get it away, and do something else.
I'm thinking, when you said you catch a wave, I think inspiration can be a way to pull you out of kind of a rut where you're just sort of like falling into like habitual kind of stuff. Sometimes you might see something or hear something that'll all of a sudden just, this wave of inspiration will compel you to kind of just push it aside and go do what's really fulfilling. Actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What would you say has probably been like one of those key pieces of inspiration that gets you going?
Oh, key.
Big questions here.
That is, yeah. It can come from many sources. I'll just sort of list. So it's like, it can be something you watch on YouTube. Like you'll go down that rabbit hole and someone's talking about will all of a sudden like trigger something in your head. Music, that's also something that can be inspirational. My kids, my daughter actually got me into the blacklight photos because she wanted to have a black light party with her friends. So I got some black lights, and then I got some black light markers, and her being her at the time, I think she was like 10. Yeah. All of a sudden she goes, "Dad, look what I'm doing," and she doodled her arm up with all these patterns and things, and they were glowing, and I was just like, oh, I'm like, I'm going to have to do that somehow and find someone willing to get drawn on. And that was, and then my son doing short films and him showing what he is doing with his friends. I'm like, that seems a lot of fun. So yeah.
It can come from multiple different locations, but sometimes it sounds like it kind of just shows up and you got to jump on it. Yeah. As soon as you see it.
Yeah. Reminds me of the author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Never read the book, but I saw a TED Talk with her on it, and she said about catching this wave of inspiration, and she said she feels it when it's into her writing, and so I'm going to talk about a bunch of people that I forget their names, but there's a poet way back when in the United States. She said she'd be out in the field helping her parents do like field stuff, and she said she could feel inspiration coming across like a wind blowing, and she would just pick up and peel away and run to the house where she had her writing, and she'd be like, if she wasn't ahead of that wave by the time she sat down, the wave would pass, and then she would be
content.
She'd feel depleted because she missed the wave. So she'd get there and she'd be like, I missed it. Then she'd go back. She'd go back out to the field and do her everyday chores.
It's strange. You You can't always just be sitting down and expecting something to happen.
Yeah.
When it does happen, you got to make some action to come from it, but it won't always just come out of nowhere. So sometimes you actually gotta get up and you gotta just actually do the work sometimes as well too, and actually move. So, yes, I absolutely agree. Very interesting too. So one question that we have as well too. So I can imagine when you are actually in those moments where like, okay, inspiration hasn't come, a wave isn't around anytime soon, things have gotten a little tough. How do you cope when things get hard or stressful?
Okay. I think I've got sort of I used to have a bit of anxiety I sort of battled with.
Yeah.
And through that, I knew a lot of people, they took sort of like a medication route. And I was like, I'm not one to like kind of go that direction. So I was like, I explored all kinds of things to try and get past that. And it applies to like, anxiety, but it can also apply to going through hard times or difficulty or challenges. And it's more like a kind of a stoic attitude and kind of getting out of your egocentric view of what's happening. And might sound a little bit cliche, but just learning how to breathe properly and kind of do some meditation kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as actors, like we've had the chance to kind of do like police cadet scenarios. And so we basically go to Medicine Hat Police Department or Lethbridge City Police Department, and we train their cadets that are going to now become police officers. The biggest piece of advice we tell them is you got to breathe, especially if you're getting nervous, all that stuff too. Take your time. Because like as performers, that's all we do, right? Like we just breathe, we feel the moments, we kind of just try to stay enlightened, or like not enlightened, sorry, just try to stay engaged with the other person, engaged with the scene partner, and it really helps to just make sure your breathing is occurring and always being reminded.
And that mindfulness, pull the world into like more of a focused place where you're like, I'm in control of this right now. I don't have to worry about this other stuff that you imagine is like chaotic and then world changing or whatever.
No, I understand. That makes sense. And people need to remember to breathe.
Just breathe.
Awesome. All right. So who would you say sticks out as being an early positive influence in your life?
There's all kinds of people you'd probably want to just bring up automatically and say, it's like, oh, like parents and grandparents and
they all, of course, deserve to be called out and shouted out as well too. But sometimes there's something else on your mind as well too.
Maybe not one person, and I think if anyone hearing me say this, they might think it's strange. But when I grew up in a small town, Saskatchewan. And it was a very religious town. I feel like my religious experience was positive.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean I carry the same belief systems through my life till now. Like that's changed quite a bit. But as far as how it's molded and shaped me and my perspective of, I guess, certain things, I think it was positive. Although I can't hold on to that. You grow out of it and you start looking at it from a different perspective, and that changes you. But that doesn't mean it wasn't positive though. So I guess that would be it.
No, that's it's very important, because like one of those a lot of people give sometimes religious groups some slack. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to get too deep into that. Of course, that is a very complicated issue that we're not prepared to have. But I do know that one of its more important qualities is community. And having a place where people can go and gather and be part of something. And that is in of itself a tool that people can use to feel a part of society and engaged with a group. Because we're social creatures. Right?
If things get too dogmatic, I think that's a human problem, not necessarily a spiritual problem. I don't know. They were getting too deep into something.
That's okay. But no, that I think is still a very. I'm very glad you had a good positive influence in that part of your life as well too. No, that's lovely. So actually, you mentioned that you were growing up in small town Saskatchewan.
Mhm.
How did you feel about growing up in small town Saskatchewan?
Well, at the time, it was just something you're used to, of course.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, after like going to college and living in a variety of different cities like Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, you realize how small and contained it was.
Yeah.
So it was very sheltered. I mean, it was good as a kid to grow up like that. I couldn't imagine myself going back to something that small. Like the town was only about 800 people. So I don't look back at it with any kind of like, no animosity.
Yeah.
No.
It was just a part of your life.
It was part of my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the same way as my kids growing up in Medicine Hat. My son especially, he's like, he doesn't see himself ever going into like a large city. He really appreciates this smaller community kind of feel. And to me, it's like a city, but
Yeah.
yeah. Did I go off trail on
No,
that question?
no.
Yeah.
You're on it. You're on it there. So what brought you to the point where you felt like you had to move out of these small towns?
I went to a career fair. It was in Saskatoon, and I was going there with my girlfriend, and we were just sort of wandering around looking at all the displays of different careers. And went to one, and it was a graphic designer guy, and he had magazines and stuff he had designed and laid out. And I was like, it's like one of those things that you take for granted because you see it all the time on many different things. You don't really think about where it comes from, like a cereal box. Somebody had to come up with that cereal box and how it was put together and how it's displayed. So he said, hey, you can go to college. He went to Medicine Hat College here.
Oh.
So he recommended it. And so then I was like, oh, maybe I'll just cast off this direction. And yeah, so my parents drove me here one year and dropped me off with all my stuff and left. And I was on my own outside of my little hometown. And so it was a little intimidating at first, but
it always is.
Yeah.
It would always be, of course. Like, but that is a huge step for a lot of people, and one that are you thankful that you took it?
Oh yeah. Because I don't know where I'd be now.
It's tough to imagine sometimes. Yeah. It is such a brave and big step to take as well too. But I mean, the world is so large that people just need to travel more. And
oh, for sure, travel is huge.
Yeah. Have you done much traveling as well?
Yeah, like I said, we went to India. And I was there for a month, and I was there with my ex-wife, and she's Punjabi. So it was good because we'd go there, visit her family, and they were great chaperones because they were able to bring us around. They knew the language. They knew how to kind of operate in this really, how I perceive it, as a very chaotic country.
Yes,
It was fascinating to see how everything worked. And we were around this big travel van. And I remember coming to this small town. And as we're coming in, there was a railway track going through the middle. And they have traffic laws there, maybe, but it tends to be a little bit chaos. But we were coming up to this or the crossing guard where arms came down so the train could come through. So we're happy to be right there at the front, and our driver like nosed like right up to that barrier.
Up to the barrier.
And the train is like just rushing past. And I'm sitting in the back looking out the windows, and people are just sort of flowing in all around us. And they're just like either side, it's just like this, like a fan of people. And they're all like ready to go. And I realized on the other side of the train, they're probably doing the same thing. So when the arms came up, it was like two walls just collided, kind of meshed together and kind of navigated through. And I was happy to get off the tracks because I'm like, what happens if a train comes now?
Yeah. This would be like a zipper.
Yeah. So it was very fascinating seeing all this truly ancient stuff, like old castles, and we went to this, it was like a Muslim sultan, maybe it was a Muslim, but it was a sultan's castle. And we went up into this one part where there's all these harem doors.
Yeah.
And they have all the old original chains still on them with big locks in the middle.
Oh my goodness.
And went to his throne room, and his throne room was like decorated all kinds of Indian motifs, but also like little pieces of metal were embedded in the stone. So our guide there they said right here in the middle they'd have this big brazier with fire in it, and the flickering flames would make all these like facets of metal kind of shimmer.
Oh.
And he'd sit at the end here, and it kind of give him this like powerful presence, right? So yeah,
you could almost see why people, especially in more ancient countries, like got so felt so spiritual about things. I did a travel over in Greece last October.
Oh yeah.
And this place was like, I remember walking into a couple of the churches and just all of the stained glass. Like I'm not a religious person myself at all, but I could definitely see why people were, because you just felt like you were on hallowed ground.
Oh yeah, like it has a
amazing
different presence to the location. Yeah.
So has any of your travels kind of inspired your work as a photographer?
I don't know if it necessarily did. No, I can't think of a place that I get often inspired by going to like galleries, and that's another little thing that I go to, art galleries and stuff like that. But actually going to locations and culture, I appreciate culture and I love going to experience those kinds of things. But no, I don't think it's inspired by work at all.
But it doesn't necessarily dictate your art, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine as well too. No, it's very informative to still kind of like engage in those cultures. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely involved in your work too, right? No, that's very good. What is one of the best pieces of advice that you've been given?
It is, do not allow yourself to sacrifice your own happiness by appealing to someone else's happiness and trying to make them happy, hoping that it'll be reciprocated. And not meaning that people are malicious or mean, or I think they could just take that kind of thing for granted. So it's important to take care of yourself and make sure that you're happy, so that it's almost like oxygen in a plane. It's like give yourself first, and then you're able to spread it to others because you're content and you're not waiting for somebody to kind of feed you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, I think that can be summarized as, if you can't love yourself, how in the heck are you going to love somebody else?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That should be good. All right, so but I guess before we kind of start diving into a little bit more photography, I got another question for you as well. How would you consider photography relevant in Medicine Hat community?
In the Medicine Hat community? Well, I know there are a lot of photographers here. I had a friend who was interested in coming here to start a photography practice, and the statistic might be wrong now. But at the time, he said Alberta had the most photographers per capita in Canada, and Medicine Hat had the most photographers per capita of Alberta. So photography is very popular here, not just as a business. And me teaching it at the college, I had lots of people coming through and wanting to learn how to do it and operate their cameras properly and all that. So, yeah, I think its relevance.
It's almost like you would consider a staple here.
Yeah.
Like, there are just tons of photographers here. Just like, well, it's also famous for pottery as well too. They got the Medelta or Medalta.
Medalta.
There we go. But yeah, no, that like there just seems to be so much going on here that not a lot of people know about. So and very excited to kind of just dive in and show it off as well too.
Oh, good.
It's Clark and Perry on the case. Clark and Perry, do what it takes. Clark and Perry, investigate.
The activities and interests of local artists in the Windy City's finest throughout both Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, Alberta. Available on TELUS, Optic TV, On Demand, VidFlex, YouTube, and more for limited time only. Terms and conditions apply.